Let me say a few words now about slavery and the American Civil War. Actually, that is a misnomer, Civil War. A civil war is a conflict between two factions who are fighting for control of the same government. That is not what happened in the United States. The South was not trying to take over the federal government, they were trying to leave it. It was perfectly acceptable to the Southern Confederacy that the northern states have their own government based in Washington, D.C. All the South wanted was to be left alone. They no longer consented to the government of the Union, so they left, which, incidentally, they had every right to do so. If the American colonies could secede from the British Empire, and if Texas could secede from Mexico, then why couldn't the South secede from the United States? If government is by the consent of the governed, and the governed no longer consent to it, then why can they not establish a government that they do consent to? So it wasn't a civil war at all. It was a war for Southern independence. But of course, you'll never hear a Northern historian call it that. Only a few of us Southerners who really understand why the South left the Union in the first place. And that war was not started over slavery. While slavery did play a role in why 7 of the 11 Southern states seceded, but not the other 4, the war was not over slavery. It was, like most wars, fought over money. Abraham Lincoln made it very clear on the day that he became a president that he had absolutely no intention of interfering with the institution of slavery in the states where it existed. I believe I have no lawful right to do so, and I have no inclination to do so, he said. He also made it very clear when he called for troops to attack the South that the war was not for the purpose of ending slavery. It was to keep the Union together. Why? What is so sacred about artificial lines drawn on a map? The main reason the North could not let the South go was that the Southern states were paying the largest part of the federal revenue, over 80% at times, and the majority of that money was being spent in the Northern states. The South had 1/3 of the population of the United States, but they were paying 80% of the taxes. They did not consider that terribly fair or constitutional, and they had a point in both cases. So Abraham Lincoln could not let them leave. When someone asked him why he didn't just let the South go, he responded, "Where then shall we get our revenue?" Lincoln did not change the purpose of the war, or better, add the second purpose of ending slavery, until almost a year and a half after the conflict began. The war was lasting much longer than he had anticipated, and a whole lot more men were dying than he ever expected. So why not go ahead and take the opportunity and end slavery as well? Interestingly, across the ocean, up until Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, the South held the high moral ground in the conflict. Britain and France could not understand why Lincoln would go to war to destroy the South's democratic decision to form their own government. All the Southern states wanted was to be free from a government that they did not want to be in. Isn't that what George Washington and Thomas Jefferson did? But when Lincoln added ending slavery as an intent of the war, he gained the upper hand. It was a brilliant move on his part, yet it was condemned by some of his own people. Lysander Spooner, who was a rabid New England abolitionist, vociferously condemned Lincoln for the war. What good does it do, Spooner asked, to free 4 million people only to enslave 9 million others? And folks, if people are forced into a government they do not want to be in, that is not freedom. Thus, the war did not start out to end slavery. It started over money. Indeed, when the Southern states seceded from the Union, the mayor of New York City wanted the city to secede with them. because New York was the major shipping point for Southern cotton. Folks, New York City became the largest city and most important shipping port in America by shipping slave-grown Southern cotton overseas. You think those Yankees cared where that cotton came from when it was making them rich? The Morgans, the Tiffanys, the Lehmans, and many others got wealthy off Southern cotton. They had no qualms about it. It's not terribly surprising that slavery has been demagogued in modern America for political purposes. One would expect that from the political left and the northern states. Yes, we are all happy that slavery has ended. It is a blight upon our history, though again an understandable one to anyone who takes the time to study and comprehend the historical record. The worst thing about American slavery is that it brought the ancestors of Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton to America.